Because I make a lot of content on pre-colonial culture, Philippine pre-colonial culture, I get a lot of requests on making content on mythology, so usually gods, goddesses, stuff like that. And to be honest, I'm not that interested in those things. And let me tell you why. So usually people will ask me about gods, goddesses. So gods and goddesses, usually that's higher mythology. It's higher mythology, okay? And then you have lower mythology, which would be monsters, demons, mga aswang, mga tikbalang, just to be clear. And my guess on why Filipinos are very much interested in Philippine mythology more than the other aspects of pre-colonial culture is because when we talk about the international media, right, and we talk about fantasy and stuff like that, we usually talk about um, Greek, Norse, Roman, uh, sometimes even Japanese mythology, which focuses on like the heroes, the gods, the monsters. I mean, Thor is in the MCU, right? And now Zeus is also in the MCU, and a lot of different creative franchises have these elements. And so I think naturally as Filipinos, we're going to be wondering, where is ours? Where are our gods? We're gonna look for the parallelisms, the counterparts, and look for what is our own. And that's why I completely understand if you're going to be looking for Philippine mythology, and I'm all for it. But personally, I'm not that interested. And the reason is because pre colonial culture is so much bigger than just characters in a way, myths. Because if you think about myths, myths are stories, right? So they have characters, they have gods, and all of those things. But there are so many other aspects of a culture, like let's say art. What is the aesthetic of a culture? And sometimes we take this for granted. So let's say you're thinking about Greek mythology, let's say Greek mythology, okay. And aesthetically, what are you thinking of? You're thinking of togas and those triremes, those islands. You're thinking about short swords and pillars, right? And those those temples, like the temple of Athena, right? Those things aren't mythology. Those things are art and architecture and other aspects of the culture of the Greeks. And so sometimes we forget that there are many other aspects that fill in the holes of a mythology. Or let's say Norse, okay? So you're thinking of Norse. What is the aesthetics of the Norse? Long ships, right? Battle axes, stuff like that. Okay, other things. Food. Well, I actually don't know much about Greek and Norse food. So there's sometimes we take for granted that mythology is just stories, and there are so many other aspects of a culture that are beyond mythology. And that's what I'm interested in. I'm interested more in folklore. I think if I understand the correct terminologies, because from what I understand, folklore just meaning lore meaning like knowledge, wisdom, and folk of the people. So like just the knowledge of the people, right? Is more all encompassing and includes mythology. And that's what I'm interested in because my eventual goal, if ever, in exploring mythology would be as a creative, would be either to write stories or design games, make games. And if I just focus on mythology, just stories of and characters, I feel like I miss the heart, like the beating heart of what it means to be a pre-colonial Filipino. Because what I want to know is like, what was the day-to-day life like of a Filipino before the Spanish came? What was the way they perceived the universe? Of which mythology, of course, is very important, but it's not everything, right? And just think about it also in games. Like let's say Hades. Hades, one of my favorite video games, is of course Greek mythology, right? Based on Greek mythology. but it has so many aspects of just the cosmology of like the understanding of the world, the aesthetics. Those things are not mythology per se. So what happens if you skip out on these details and just focus on mythology? Well, you might end up having strange creations, I guess, wherein it's kind of superficial. So like it's like as if you just get the character and you put them in a situation which doesn't resemble the culture that it came from. Think of like how in anime, when an anime would take, like, let's say Fate Stay, the series, when they would take a hero from another mythology and just put it in that realm, right? It doesn't reflect the original mythology that it comes from, or if it does, it kind of does it superficially. It's not an exact representation of that culture. And that's what I'm interested in, like the representation of the culture. And I just feel mythology isn't enough. Mythology isn't enough without the other branches of folklore: aesthetics, philosophy, what food did they eat, what was their politics, what was their goals in life, what was the family like, what were their values and virtues, those things. All of those gives mythology context. But if you just focus on mythology without that folklore context, it becomes removed and weird.